Hey everyone, this is Kent from the Hickory Creek SMART Fund. Today we're joined by one of the investors in the fund, Dylan Robertson. Dylan, great to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks, Kent.
Yeah, so Dylan, just tell us a little bit about yourself first before we get started.
Sure. Yeah, I've been working professional for the last 15 years in accounting and finance. Been in a couple different industries, but in the last 8 years, been involved in the maritime ocean freight space up in Alaska. So, yeah, but it's full time, kind of the W-2 path, corporate world. And so that's kind of been my trajectory for many years.
So, Dylan, what kind of alternative investments have you invested in?
Yeah, that journey started about 3 years ago when I was just seeing the path of a lot of my coworkers and just kind of the corporate grind and thinking, man, I gotta diversify my streams of income. I gotta get educated and see what is out there. But I didn't know anything about alternatives at the time, so it was a massive learning curve. And since then, I've dabbled in some mortgage notes, private lending to businesses and real estate projects, real estate syndication, and there's a ton more I've looked into for sure, and it's been an eye opener, no doubt.
Yeah. So, you've been investing for 3 years. What are some of the frustrations or issues you run into as an investor out there trying to find good deals?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple things that come to mind. First off is my own comfort and confidence, with do I know what to look for, how to properly assess an opportunity and all the pieces. I mean, there's the time component and giving it adequate time. Um, and then there's just um, the challenge of there's so much out there. Everything sounds great. Everything sounds like a home run or a no-brainer. And you're trying to sift through who to trust, what's really accurate, what's not. And when you're not as experienced as well, it's harder to know. So I think everyone has their different gifts and strengths and weaknesses. And so I think um, you don't even know what those are necessarily when you're coming into these things. And so that's part of maturing as an investor. But you definitely need help. I think need a community, need mentorship to help mitigate some of those blind spots.
I think you said it. You really don't know what you don't know until you realize you don't know it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you said it. There's so many sponsors out there, and really a lot of them have come on the scene in the last 5 or 10 years. I know you may not have been around that long, but
Hmm.
what made you be attracted to, you jumped on one of the investments in the fund. We've had several in there, but what attracted you? To the fund and the particular investment that you jumped on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first off is, you know, this is a relational game, a very key piece to I think to success in the alternative space, especially is relationships, trust, integrity, track record, those various things. And that's sometimes hard to quantify or to measure, um, but it's very vital. And so, you know, having gotten connected with you and, we went back and forth for many, many months, and just kind of observing and learning and seeing what your process is, what your mindset is, and how that influences the fund is key. So it's kind of like I just kind of observing from afar for some time until we built a relationship. There's some trust. There's like, okay, you've tried a lot of things, done a lot of things. Um, and so that gave me some more confidence to consider a deal. And then there's the next step, which is, okay, let's look at this particular deal. Does it make sense? Is it fit within various parameters, my DNA, investor DNA, et cetera? So I think it's kind of, there's multiple steps to it, multiple layers, but um, I did want some exposure to, some upside, with a startup or with private equity, and that's something that you were able to bring to the table, which normally, I mean, I never would have known about it or had that access for sure.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of being in the fund. I've been in real estate for over 20 years, and I've paid a lot of money to get in the right rooms with the right people, and that has gotten me deal flow that most people don't see, and that's the benefit of the deal that you jumped in. It wasn't necessarily something um, like one of our real estate deals. You jumped in on a private equity deal, really it's an X deal, which means you're not really looking for a monthly cash flow. You're a young guy. You saw something you liked in that deal, and all of us that invested in that deal are hoping that one really hits a 10, 15X. So that one's totally different from some of our cash flowing deals. But was the fact that so many of us were going, this is kind of a loaded question, but I think we had seven, eight, nine investors join in that deal with you. How did that make you feel being able to with that particular deal?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely can be really valuable to not feel alone or it's all on your shoulders, to vet the deal, to assess the different players, to, you know, also you work through your own mental state. I mean, because we all have different things, fear and greed, and we have, we can be overly optimistic or idealistic, and that can influence our decision making, whether maybe we don't make the move because we're afraid or we think it's too risky, and others can help kind of maybe bring a different perspective. Or the alternative is true where, it's like, oh, this is a home run, no brainer, guarantee kind of thing, and people might bring a different perspective as well. And so there is power in community and just like a lot of things in life, doing things together helps with endurance, helps with pushing through hard things, doing hard things. So there definitely was that definitely helped, is especially, with you and some of the other fund managers involved, who had a lot of experience as well, who had, a connection to this opportunity, to the team. Um, it definitely is like, okay, like not that it's a shoe in or anything, but this isn't a scam or, this isn't something like a bait and switch. Um, uh, there's obviously a lot of variables here, but that definitely helped me be open to the idea at first, because when you hear these big return potentials and it's like, oh, flashy, flash in the pan. And I think there's plenty of that out there that's totally garbage. And so, but there are opportunities like that are real. And so it's just like, how do you know which is which? And so I think, community can be a part of that. Trustworthy people can be a part of that. What is their incentives, right? Are they in the deal themselves, right? Are they investors themselves? Do they have a lot to lose? Is their reputation on the line? All those things can help you assess the deal.
Yeah, so you and I talked, we've been talking for a while before you ever invested. So it's not like official. I guess when you join, when you do your first investment, you're officially in the fund. We talk about joining the fund, but what kind of access did you have to me, during that time leading up to before you did your first investment? Right now, the fund is relatively small. We're just under $2 million. I think we've got about 13, 14 investors in the fund. But we're looking to really grow this year. What kind of access did you have to me during that time.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because a lot of times there's a barrier to entry into certain benefits or resources or communications with, whether it's a membership sort of deal or a mastermind or a fund. And it's like, hey, you got to pay to play. It's like if you want to talk to me or you want information or knowledge, mentorship, you know, here's the entry price, right? And I understand that for sure, but it definitely is preferred in my mind to have to be able to kind of get um, a feel for someone and how they operate and before you actually put money on the line. And so I think that comes down to like abundant mindset as well and scarcity. It's like the people that are like giving and serving and producing content and without necessarily something in return immediately is appealing to me. And I know that's what I've experienced with you and which I think did actually help me feel more confident or more interested in investing and being a part of the fund is because when people are just very transactional, it's like I don't really want that, and that's how some people operate. But I'm looking for kind of a long-term relationship, personal relationship, that a partnership, collaboration. So that's something that was stood out to me. And there's a few other, people that I've found that are similar, and it just kind of helps me like feel more comfortable and build trust.
Yeah. I think we're all looking for sponsors that are like that are responsive and personal.
Yeah.
And I try to build that relationship with investors too, because the very deal you invested in, I remember making sure, asking questions, literally trying to talk people out of that investment
Yeah.
because it was one of those home run type swings and checking to make sure, hey, you realize this is a home run swing. It could be a strikeout. That's not a typical deal in the fund, but I remember, being able to get on the phone and talk to each investor, making sure, hey, we're pushing the button on this today. We're good to go, right? And making sure everybody understood that. So you're not
Yeah.
I wouldn't call you a new investor, but do you think the smart fund would be a good fit for a quote new investor?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are lots of ways to invest, lots of ways to get into the game, if you will. And, we each have our own capacities and different desires or interests. But, for someone who's, either new or even just someone who's looking for access to better deal flow and maybe better terms and opportunities that they wouldn't necessarily see. I mean, it's a great resource, and it can definitely give you um, access and like expand your, the possibilities, right? I mean, I'm a part of a lot of different newsletters, and I'm getting deal flow, just updates like, oh, interesting. Let me learn about that. Even if you don't invest in every deal, that's okay, right? And your timing and your situation is going to vary. But, as long as, you know, you're in the accredited status, to me, it's a great, it's a great opportunity and just the relationships that you have and, the masterminds you're a part of and is really valuable. And you're paying a lot of money to be in those spaces and you've put a lot of money into just setting up the fund and you can, go by yourself. You can be a lone ranger, which I've done too. And that's definitely an option. But it's like, you don't have to do that. It's not like it's the only way. So just knowing about these other opportunities, it's kind of like you can do both. You can vet your own deals, you can look at stuff yourself, but then be a part of a community that can help accelerate maybe your knowledge and your cash flow or whatever it may be. So I don't really see a whole lot of downside.
We were just talking last night actually about some deals that have gone sideways and how many investors. It's really sad because
Yeah.
we know when a deal loses, when a deal goes back to the bank, all the equity. I mean, if it was $100 million deal, that could be 20, 25, $30 million of equity. So
Yeah,
it's not a very kind place for a new investor to be wandering around, right? It's
that's
really
true.
so. Again, the Smart Flex Fund, I formed it for newer investors where they could kind of ride along with more experienced investors and not feel like they had to be forced into anything like most blind funds out there, but they could pick or choose in the Smart Flex Fund what they wanted to invest in. So
Yeah.
before we jump off here, if anyone's sitting on the fence about joining the fund or really just investing in one of the assets in the fund, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, there are, I would say there's definitely a lot of unique aspects and benefits to the deals that are in the Smart Flex Fund. Whether it's from collateral to upside equity to cash flow to depreciation, depending on what it is. Um, and part of it is just getting educated and getting familiar with the terms and the upsides and the risks and that's a muscle you got to learn to flex. And obviously, you're trying to do that and help take a lot of that weight off someone's shoulders. But we each have to take responsibility for our investments and our capital, and we're not just throwing it into the wind like, oh, I'm just gonna let Kent do this and trust him. Like, yeah, you want to trust but verify. So it and you can there's tons of deals that I've put a lot of effort into, reached out to operators and different fund managers, done the Zoom calls and haven't moved forward with, and that's okay. Like it's not all or nothing. But that's part of the learning. That's how I've learned a lot is just learning, hearing, asking questions. So don't be afraid to do that. I mean, it's okay. It's kind of part of the game, and people are, very understanding. So to me, and there's always deals around the corner. I'll also say that. I mean, it's not like, oh, this is the one chance to get a multifamily, you know, in the Southeast. It's like, well, there's one around the corner, probably next week, and the next week. So there's always deal flow. There's always another deal. It's like it may not be the right time. You may not be ready, and that's okay. But I do think as you kind of work that muscle, you'll be able to act quicker. You'll be able to act more confidently when the time comes, or if something comes up that's really strong or fits within your needs and desires. So, yeah, I would say just get educated, get exposure, and learn to work those muscles out because it's a completely different uh, set of muscles, I would say, than from a lot of the traditional stuff. And so it does take time, but it's worth learning.
Yeah. One of the things I see are people just get frozen. They get that analysis paralysis and they get
Mhm.
frozen. I created the Smart Flex Fund to make it easy for people to dip their toe into alternatives. So I'm super glad you joined me today for this. I hope
Yeah,
this helps anybody that's kind of sitting on the fence about whether to join the fund. So Dylan, again, thanks for
yeah,
joining me.
sure thing.